Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Not much going on, just the whole world walking into World War III. We also have some bad news when it comes to inflation and even better news when it comes to the crypto space. Let's go ahead and get started. Biggest piece of news this week is the situation in Israel. They were attacked by the terrorist group Hamas in Israel. A lot of peaceable civilians, so now they are counterattacking, and the problem isn't one or the other. The problem is actually if Israel now does their land invasion, which we're talking about a full-scale war, what's going to happen is all of the other Muslim countries are going to get involved because they want to defend Palestine. So really complicated situation. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but the problem is that we're literally probably walking into World War III, and that's definitely not a good thing for anybody. The stocks in the U.S., mostly negative. The Dow was the only one that was positive at 0.11%. Canada was surprisingly positive at almost 1.40%. And some of the negative news when it comes to the CPI is the consumer spending. Let's just call it what the prices of the consumer is, right? So the economy in the United States is almost 70% consumer spending. Most of the industrialized, more advanced nations, all of Europe, China's getting into this category, South Africa, the majority of the bigger economies, most of the economy is consumer spending, especially US, Canada, Europe, Australia, Japan. And the problem is that if there's good news on the inflation front, then they will do the right thing when it comes to the interest rates, and then that will be a good thing for you and I. But the situation now is that the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, actually rose in September and was higher than expected. So that means that the Federal Reserve, or the central bank in the United States, their number one goal is to keep inflation in check, which means that if the inflation is higher, or the CPI is higher than what they want it to be, or even what's expected for them to be, then they're going to most likely either increase rates or leave rates higher for longer. That's a disaster for you and I due to the fact that higher interest rates mean everything is more expensive. And that's why consumers now are starting to slow down their spending. Gas and rents are keeping prices high. In addition to the pressure on consumers, the story I always give you guys about Five Guys, they did a fancy meme now for it. But I know you guys are seeing in the grocery stores and in other places that inflation is much higher than just 3, 4, 5%. So that is going to eat a lot more of the discretionary spending for the consumer. And once that happens, that means that almost 70% of the largest economy in the world is not going to be there anymore, right? So you can see how you can connect the dots. The Producer Price Index, which is the index at which the cost of goods and services is produced at, there's a measurement for that, rose 0.5% in September as well, which is also higher than expected. So not only is the actual inflation, or the index for the consumer, going up higher than expected, now at the producer level, before it gets to the consumer spending part, right, is higher than expected as well. So it looks like we're going to continue to increase, which means that the central bank in the United States is most likely going to either leave rates for higher, longer, or raise again to try to control the inflation, which means that you and I are not heading in a good direction. If you eat fast food, I have really bad news for you. The top 10 popular fast food chains, they found animal contraceptives and also antibiotics in these foods, even Chick-fil-A, for example. And in school lunches, 43 of school lunches participated in the lab, found 95% of the lunches had glyphosate. Glyphosate, I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's a carcinogen, which means that it causes cancer in people. Kind of a great system they have set up, right? They feed your kids cancer to give them diseases, and then the pharmaceutical companies will give you the pill to solve that. And then that pill will cause other problems, so you have to take other pills. It's a beautiful little merry-go-round, money for the pharmaceutical companies and the health industry as a whole. 74% of the school lunches as well contained at least one harmful pesticide, so try to eat organic as much as you can. Overseas market news, European markets were mostly mixed. The Istanbul markets were the most negative of all at over 4%. Latin American markets are mostly higher. The Merval in Argentina went up over 20%. Africa and the Middle East is mixed. And then in the far, far east, mostly higher. Australia, Japan, that area. The Nikkei in Japan was actually the highest of all at 4.26%. Crypto news, Caroline Ellison, if you guys don't remember, was the ex-girlfriend and part of the mega orgy that they had at the company of FTX, which was the second before it went bankrupt, second largest crypto exchange in the world. She said that Sam Bankman-Fried, which was the CEO of FTX, directed her to commit crimes. So it looks like everybody's pointing the finger at good old Sam. Another thing that I found was really interesting is he paid $55 million, I think, for an hour of Tom Brady's time, or a week, I think it was. Good to be Tom Brady. Spot Bitcoin ETFs now have a 90% chance of being approved. I won't go into what an ETF is, but think of it like an index or a separate product that's connected, or a derivative of the actual product, which makes it a little bit easier to invest in. Genesis crypto broker halts withdrawals, according to FT. And one of the things that was really interesting in the crypto space is Ferrari now is accepting crypto payments for all of its cars. So all you crypto billionaires can go get yourself a Ferrari. Bitcoin is lower for the week on the Israel situation, down almost 4% to 26,892. In commodities, oil, gold, and silver went up quite a bit once it came to the understanding where it wasn't just a terrorist attack on Israel, but also a war that Israel has claimed to have, where they're going to make a land invasion against Palestine. That's going to indicate that this is going to be a much bigger issue, because a lot of the other Muslim countries are going to get involved to defend Palestine. So because of that fear, people gravitate towards what they consider a safe haven. So gold and silver exploded. Gold went up over 5% to 1933 and 50 cents. Silver went up over 5% to 22.84. Brent posted its largest weekly gain in a month. The U.S. crude went up almost 6% to 87.59, while Brent, which is the international crude, went up almost 7.50% to 90.89. U.S. banking and finance news. The U.S. debt now is increasing at $1.2 billion an hour, completely unsustainable. Actually, 40% of all the dollars that were ever created since the beginning of the Federal Reserve, which is the third central bank the United States has had, was created 3 years ago. So now, and this is a little conspiracy Marcello, now you're going to see that Ukraine doesn't matter anymore, right? Now they have another war to funnel their money laundering operation in, and that's the Israel-Middle East war. So you're going to see that now Ukraine is going to completely be forgotten. Nearly 75,000 homeowners in Canada are now looking to refinance their mortgage. Canada is very different than the United States, where they only have a 5-year mortgage. They have to renew every 5 years. So now people are going to go from having a 2% interest rate up to 7%, which could literally double or triple their monthly payments. So imagine the situation you're in right now, right? Where you're literally paying double or triple already for food. You're not making ends meet, and now your monthly payment for your house is going to go up by 2 or 3 times. Not bueno at all. Because of the attacks on Israel, the shekel, which is the Israel currency, weakened to its lowest level since 2016. The Bank of Israel is going to announce that they're going to sell some of their foreign reserves to try to prop up the domestic currency. And in Eurozone, the inflation went to 4.3%, went down a little bit in comparison to the U.S. It's the lowest level since October 2021. In political news, if you got the things in your arm for the pandemic, if you get too many of them, you're actually not able to get life insurance. And one of the things that the CDC actually admitted recently is that if you take the thing in your arm, I don't want to say it because they'll ban the channel, your increase for myocarditis is 13,200% higher, which means that basically you're going to have heart problems if you took the thing in your arm, especially younger men. Another thing that I found really interesting is the CDC is going to get rid of the V cards, the thing in your arm cards, where you have to prove that you took it. Remember what they did to us. They got fired from jobs. People couldn't go, in some stores. People were having problems in their apartment complexes. Just remember what they did, because this is just a trial run. It's going to get a lot worse. Fentanyl assaults in the Communist Republic of New York have gone up 41% over the last 4 years. Remember that New York City and New York State is run by the communists on the left. And also carjackings in D.C., which is the Communist Republic of District of Columbia, have spiked 111%, in the first 10 months of 2023. What do they have in common? Putin is all but certain to win the re-election in March and widely expected to continue his reign in the Kremlin in 2030. I would be afraid after Putin leaves, because the next person can be more radical than him, and we might have a bigger situation on our hands. Robert F. Kennedy, one of the presidential candidates, mostly on the left, and that was part of the Democratic Party, has decided to go independent because of all the corruption in the Democratic Party. And one of the things I want to say is I try to always stay kind of apolitical when I do these videos. And the right and the left, to me, is really, they're all corrupt just the same. The way I describe it is they're both driving the car off the cliff, just one drives faster than the other, essentially. The Biden regime, if you didn't know, gave Gaza $75 million in early October, even when they knew they were planning this attack on Israel. So it gives you the priority. That's why I kind of gave you that conspiracy theory that the U.S. government uses these wars to funnel money back to themselves. In economic news, UK retail sales went up 2.7% in September, up from the previous month, but still below the 12-month average. And as I mentioned to you guys, 40% of all the dollars ever created, this goes back to what, the 1900s, right? 1913, I think it is, were made in the last 3 years. Now, the problem is going to be now that we have to support this war in Israel, right? Ukraine, they're going to kind of just forget about, you'll see. But now we're going to have an even higher debt load because we have to support the situation now in Israel, which can turn out to be much bigger than before. Corporate news, Apple CEO Tim Cook sold the most stock in the last 2 years, $41 million of stock, or about 511,000 shares. There's other two Apple executives that also sold stock as well. Millions and millions of dollars, And one of the things I always tell you is, don't pay attention to what they say, watch what they do. Why would they all of a sudden start selling these shares? It's like the year before the pandemic when we had a wave of CEOs that just decided to resign. Right? Most of you guys kind of don't see this in the mainstream news. That's why I like to do these videos as well, to give you a lot of this conspiracy theories. But, I think something's going to go down because that's not normal. Major banks in the United States are closing over 3,000 branches nationwide. I don't know if it's because of the crime or because they're in financial trouble. I would assume maybe it's both. And Bank of America, which is the second largest bank in the United States, closed over 50 offices in just 1 week. So not bueno for them. PepsiCo, their shares went up almost 2% after hitting a 16-month low last week. They talked about price hikes. They reported revenue rising 6.7%, while prices rose 11% due to inflation. Samsung is expecting a 78% drop in operating profit in quarter three, but their shares are still up. And LVMH, which is the largest luxury firm in the world, they have companies like Louis Vuitton and Hermes and all these other ones. They're reporting a slowdown in growth in quarter three. So now people with money that go out and buy these things, right? $1,000 purses and things, they're now starting to see a little bit of a slowdown. So now the consumer spending is starting to affect a lot of these rich people as well. So the situation with the economy is starting to expand to the people who matter, the people with the bling bling. Tesla signed a leasing contract in Shanghai Free Trade Zone Group. It's going to open a massive sales and service center in the industrial park, at the largest in China. They already have 300 stores in China. There's actually a pretty cool thing online where they're compared a Rivian and a Cybertruck side by side. I thought that was pretty cool. And the UK top competition regulator gave permission Microsoft to buy the Activision Blizzard of $69 billion. There were some things that they didn't want to approve, but now that they cleared EU, United States, and also the UK regulators, now they can go ahead and get the deal done. Walgreens, they went up over 7% after they plan to and are proceeding with over $1 billion in cutting costs by 2024. And they said that they're also going to close a lot of unprofitable stores as well. And in the technology front, I don't know if you guys saw the Sphere in Las Vegas. It's a new concert hall, which looks absolutely incredible. U2 actually just did a concert there. And what it is think of it like a tube, just a tube, vertically. And it has something like 23,000 LED lights. Picture like a TV just all around the Sphere. So you're literally sitting and you could appear to be in the middle of a space or in the clouds or in Mars. It's absolutely amazing. Look it up on YouTube. Amazon now is getting into the internet satellite business to compete with SpaceX. They are going to deploy one prototype satellite from Florida. After that, they plan on putting up over 1,000, I should say, satellites to compete with Starlink, which is SpaceX satellite internet service. Remember that SpaceX started in 2019. And Saudi Arabia energy minister said that they're going to have the first hydrogen train in the Middle East, which are going to begin trials next week. Don't know what's going on with the Hyperloop. Supposedly they were supposed to do something there. In investment news, Denmark, their defense ministry is going to restart ammunition production after a 55-year gap. Rumors of war. And in international events, at least 2,000 people died from a 6.3 earthquake in Afghanistan. Italy is planning mass evacuations due to the earthquakes around the supervolcano of Campi Flegrei, which is near Naples. They were jolted by more than 1,000 earthquakes in the region. And there was another subsea gas pipeline which was affected, which goes from Finland to Estonia under the Baltic Sea. This is in Europe. And the Finnish government is saying that it could have been a deliberate act. Remember that the Nord Stream 2 was damaged, right? And now the EU buys a lot more gas from the United States than it does from Russia. Wonder if that could be a coincidence. Australians said an overwhelmingly no to modify the constitution. They wanted to try and put a new government entity or department where they were going to hear from indigenous people, and they wanted to change the constitution. Not that the constitution hasn't been working perfectly fine for hundreds of years now. I think it's 112 years in the case of Australia, but the Communist Republic of Australia is probably going to continue to try to do that again. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.